Hey guys, what's up? I'm Nawaf, and today I'm taking you through another payment gateway integration video. This time I'm taking you through the gateway tokenization feature with Mastercard Gateway. Okay, first, what is tokenization? Tokenization is when you replace a sensitive information with a non-sensitive equivalent. To give you an example from life, imagine my name, Nawaf, was a sensitive information that should not be revealed. I can create an alias, like let's say Bob, and you can refer to me instead with my alias Bob instead of my actual name to hide my actual name. In this case, Bob is the token and the actual sensitive data is my name. So in payments, Bob would be the token number and the sensitive information would be, of course, the card number. What Mastercard Gateway can do is that it can take in the card information, which is sensitive, and give you a token equivalent and tells you, here you go, use this token number to pay instead of using the actual card number, so that you don't have to save the card number and you don't have to be PCI compliant yourself. And that's what we call gateway tokenization. It's when the token is created by the gateway. Later in this video, I'm going to also take you through network tokenization, which is when the token is created by the network. But first, let me show you why would anybody use tokenization. So let me show you the end result of what we're trying to implement. So here on the left side, I got a dummy store. It's just a skateboard shop store. And in this store, every account, like my account, has a wallet. And in this wallet, I have my cards that are saved on this store. And I can add a new card like this. Like this. By the way, this store uses hosted session library for Mastercard Gateway to collect the card information and push it directly to the gateway so that I don't have to pass the card information through my server and fall into PCI compliance scope. I'll create a video on how to implement hosted session. I'll link it down in the description box below. Check that out before watching this video, please. And a lot of things will make sense in this video. Okay, so we saved the new card into the wallet. Now we can go shopping, add an item, go to the cart, and I can go ahead and pay with the card that I just saved here. There you go, like this. I can also delete the card and instead choose to pay with a new card that I have not saved previously and store that card in my wallet for the next time I come and buy something. There you go, the payment is successful. Now if you refresh, you can see the new card has been saved and you can see it over here also in the wallet. So this is what we're trying to achieve. Now we're going to take you through how we achieved it. In this project instead, this is the same code but without the integration to the gateway tokenization API, which is what I'll be covering in this video. I'll make another video for how to create a nice store with a wallet and an account and a card and a saved card and all that. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so the secret behind all this magic is this API. This is Mastercard Gateway Tokenization API. This is what we're using to create the token. It's documented in this page, which is the official documentation for the Gateway Tokenization API. I'll link that in the description box below. Make sure to read that. Okay, so here the API is pretty straightforward. Here I'm just saying the type of the payment instrument that I'm using, which is just a card, credit, or debit. And this is the card number, expiry, and the security code on the back of the card. You send the request to the gateway, and then you get the response back here in the token parameter with the token number. Now this is what you'll be using to pay. But what I'm doing here is that I'm collecting the card information directly and putting it on the API call. You shouldn't be doing this unless you're fully PCI compliant, which is hard to achieve. So I'll show you how you can achieve the same, but without having your server touch the card information at all. And we do that using the session.js library that, again, we created a tutorial on, video link in the description box below. So let's go to the app here. Let's go to the wallet. Here we can use hosted session to collect the card information, push it directly to the gateway, not to my server then the gateway, but directly to the gateway through an iframe. This is actually an iframe. And I will obtain a session identifier in response. Here, I'm printing out the session identifier on the console. So I can use this get request over here to show you what this session ID is referencing. This is the card that I just collected. And now, instead of supplying the card information directly in the API like this, you can instead supply the session identifier referencing the card information like this. So you send it and it will respond with the same. Here's the token which we will use for payment. You're probably wondering, both the session ID and the token store the card information, so what's the difference between the two? So it's just, the difference is that the session ID is a temporary container that we use to perform an operation in like the next 5 minutes. But the token is something you save and you keep until the card expires to pay or do any other operations with the card. Okay, so the next question is, how do we pay once we obtain the token? And you do that simply like this. This is the same payment API that we showed in the hosted session video, but before that API took a session ID to pay, like this. Here instead we supply a token. So I have my token here. All I gotta do is just send the payment request with the amount in the currency and the order identifier, and the payment is approved. And that's how you can pay with a token. It's very simple. Okay, so now we get to the fun part, the coding part. I'm gonna show you how to implement that API in this app, integrated with this app. So the first thing we gotta do is we gotta create an endpoint that uses this API to create the token. So just like in all my previous videos, we don't have to code this from scratch. Postman has this great tool here on the right. I moved my face out of the way so you can see it. It's here, the code symbol. Just click on this, select Node.js Axios, and here you're gonna find a nice code sample that you could just grab and paste in your project like this. And you can go ahead and start removing the hard-coded values and all the other stuff like that. Okay, so that's the first thing that I'm going to do in this endpoint, which is to create the token, but now I got to save it somewhere. I got to save it in my database. For my database, I can save the token just like this. Here, I'm accessing my user's collection, which has a cards sub-collection inside it. I use my token ID as my document ID, and then I just use this parameter to get the mask token number, and this one to store the expiry, and the card brand. That's the 3 information that I need that I'm going to display in the wallet and the checkout page. That's all I need. And then I return the tokenization API response to my client side. So that's really all that you gotta do. But just to give you an idea of how this looks like in my database, let me show you what it looks like in Firebase. So this over here is my database that I play around for all my videos. And here's my user's document. Here's my user ID. And this is the sub collection for this user that stores the card information. This is the only card that I have saved. When I call that API, another document is going to get added here similar to this. So let me show you what that looks like by testing it on the simulator. Okay, here's my endpoint. I need a new session ID, so I'm going to get it from the app again. Back to the store. Selecting add to wallet will just create a session. I'll grab that session and I'll just put it here manually in Postman. Send the request and see what I get. There you go, tokenization was successful, but let's check the database just to be sure. We need to see it with our own eyes. There you go, this is my new token here saved in the database. Okay, now let's deploy it to production and test it also in production. I'm gonna delete this and try saving again. Okay, so we got our production endpoint here. Let's try again. Gonna give me a new session ID from my fake wallet. Add to wallet. Getting my session ID here. I'm gonna slap it here in Postman. Send. And there you go. It's working. Checking my database. This is my new token number. There you go. Okay, so it works in production. And now we're gonna go ahead and implement it on the client side in our React.js project. Okay, so the sun is up thanks to the power of editing, and we were gonna implement this CreateToken endpoint that we just deployed to production into our client side. So to do that, just go back to Postman. Here's where we tested the endpoint in production. Just click on this code symbol over here and you're gonna get an example that you can take and implement in your React.js project. So just copy this, go back to your project, find add to wallet. So clicking on add to wallet triggers this, and this triggers this update session form, which triggers this callback form session update. Here currently we're only displaying the session ID. I'm going to implement the CreateToken API call here after the session ID is generated. So I copy this sample from Postman, paste it here, and I'll get rid of this hard-coded session ID and just put this one here instead. Same thing with my user ID. I have a user state variable that stores the same value, so I'm just going to put this here instead. Again, this will be used by my server to know where to place the token. So this token belongs to this user. I'm going to get rid of this and wrap everything in a try-catch statement. Here, after this request is successful, it's going to say card has been added to wallet, and then it's going to trigger the reload of the cards so that it loads the new card from the database and show it here. Okay, so save, and let's go ahead and try this. Delete this card that I saved previously and enter it again. There you go, it worked. It refreshes and it reloads all the cards again, and this is my new card right here. Okay, so this is how to create, and now I'm going to show you how to pay with the token. Okay, for payment using a token, recall at the beginning of the video when I was showing you the different API samples, Postman API samples for Mastercard Gateway, I showed you a sample that for payment using a token, and this is that sample again. Now I'm gonna need to implement an endpoint that call this API request from my server to Mastercard Gateway server. So to do that, just like all the other APIs before, we click on the code symbol here, we get the sample here, just take it, copy it, and this is my empty endpoint payWithToken where I'm going to implement this. Here, I'm going to go ahead and fix the hard-coded values. Okay, so this is my implementation. I'm going to go ahead and test it in the emulator first. So it's working in the emulator. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and deploy it to production. Okay, so my endpoint is up in production. I'm going to test it there as well. And it works in production. I'm going to go ahead now, and just like before, I'm going to get a sample from Postman and implement this in my front end. Here, I'm going to go and find this button, pay with the card number, which is here. This is the payment button. When I click on it, handle pay click gets triggered, and here it checks. If you selected pay with a new card, then a state variable called payment card will be new, and if that is the case, then it's going to update the session, and updating the session is going to trigger the payment request. But I don't want to do that. So when the user selects one of these radio buttons for the cards, what happens, as you can see here in the code in my radio group, I'm going to assign the card ID, which is the token ID, as the value of the state variable payment card, as you can see here. And when that is the case, which is when the card is not new, payment request token gets triggered instead, and payment request token is currently empty. And here's where I'm going to place my payWithToken endpoint. But I got to go ahead and modify a few things. One quick note, note that I passed the token ID to this method because that is what's happening here when handle pay collect gets triggered. I called payment request token and I passed payment card, which is a state variable that is now containing the token ID as its value. So the token ID goes here, and then it propagates here, and it goes into my request token. Okay, so we went ahead and implemented this. Now let's test it. I have Visa card already selected. I'm just gonna select to pay with that, and let's see what happens. Order successful, and here in the console you can see the payment response has been returned with the amount being approved. Okay, now another cool thing that I want to show you is how to pay with a new card and choose to save that newly entered card for a future payment. We can achieve this without creating any new endpoint for payment and then tokenizing a card. We can reuse the same payment request method, which has the regular payment request from the previous video for hosted session. But first we're gonna have to modify this to have two more variables. So here I have a checkbox called save card for future use. When I select this state variable over here, save card to wallet, becomes true. So I need to pass this here to my endpoint in order to tell my server to save the card when I ask it to. And since I'm creating a token, I'm going to be storing it, so I need to tell my server which user will this token belong to. So I need to pass the user ID. My UID is stored in this variable. Now I actually need to modify my send payment endpoint that I've deployed before, which is this one, to actually apply these changes. This is that endpoint we implemented in our previous hosted session implementation video. Again, linked in the description box below. Please watch that also. Here we're gonna add a condition after the payment is complete to say if the user has selected their card to be saved and the payment is successful, save this card and add it to the database for a future payment. It will add it to the wallet. Here in my request payload, I'm gonna add those two variables that we mentioned earlier, which is save card to wallet, which could be true or false, and the UID, which is for my current user is this value. But of course I'm going to be passing this value dynamically in my code. And now here I need to add a condition called if request body save card to wallet is true and payment status, which is a parameter that's returned in the payment response, is captured, which means the payment is successful, go ahead and tokenize the card. And here you can use the same code that we used in the wallet component in our project. So go back to that here, and you can just copy the code that we implemented here. Go back to your endpoint here, paste it, and here you gotta just clean up some inconsistencies. So for example, here we're not getting the user from a variable called user, we're getting it from the request body, which is in a parameter called UID. And this one, the correct format would be actually this, in our case that is. And here I'm not gonna even bother returning a response in the payload to the user. I'm just gonna log it in the console. But of course in a real production app you should do a better job of returning the error of why the card was not saved to the user. This is a tutorial and we want to keep it simple. So if the user selected the card to be saved to wallet and the payment is successful, which we detect using these two variables, I'm going to use the session ID, which I get from the body, and the UID, which I also get from the body, to send a request to tokenize the card using the endpoint that I created earlier, and then call that endpoint, and then go ahead and do what we were doing before, which is returning the payment response data to the user. Okay, so let's test this in the emulator. Note that in my database I currently only have one token, one Visa token, and I'm gonna test this time. I'm gonna just test using Postman. I'm gonna create a session that has a Mastercard card in it. And I'm gonna send a request. If this works, I should be seeing a new card added in my database. There you go. So the payment is successful. Now let's see if the tokenization was successful as well. Going to the database, now we see there's a new Mastercard card added. And refreshing the page here, now we see there are two cards saved in the wallet. Okay, cool. So I'm not gonna even test it in production. I'm just gonna deploy it right away and implement it in my and then implement it in my front end. Okay, so my new endpoint is ready. I don't need to copy this because it's already implemented in my client side, so I just need to test it only. That's it. So here I'm already passing the switch for saving the card, and I'm already passing the user ID. And let's go ahead and delete one of these two cards so that we can test this end to end. I'll delete the Visa one. Now here, I'm going to select pay with new card, enter the new card, and then pay with new card. It's paying, it's paying, it's paying. Payment is successful. And if you check the wallet, now we got two cards, so it worked. Okay, so what we just demonstrated is payment using a regular gateway token, which means that the gateway will save the card number, and then when you pay using that token, it will just send the card number for payment. That is regular gateway token. But the gateway has another nice feature, which is it has the ability to tokenize the card that it has saved with the schemes. So it can take the card number that is saved and then send it to network tokenization services, like for example MDES with Mastercard, or VTS with Visa, or AATS with American Express. Obtain a network token directly from the scheme and then store it on the gateway along with the card number. So the gateway will store your card number and your network token that belongs to that card number, and then in the authorization will pay using the network token instead of the card number. And that is better because it improves the approval rate. It lets the card information update automatically using that network token. The network token is connected to the card account, so if the card expires and the cardholder issues a new card, the network token is going to pay with that new card that replaced the old expired card or the stolen card. And in order to achieve this, the merchant does not have to change their integration at all. All they gotta do is to just ask their payment service provider or acquirer to toggle on the network tokenization feature for their integration, and then the gateway will start tokenizing the cards with the schemes and then sending network tokens instead of regular card number for authorization and improve their approval rate. This is all actually explained here in the integration guide for network tokenization. I'll link this below in the description box. Here there's a section that says network tokenization for gateway tokens. And here we'll say the same thing that I said, which is basically that you don't have to change the integration. All you gotta do is just ask your payment service provider or acquirer to enable this for you. But because we're paying using the network tokens and not the card number, there'll be additional fields returned in the payment response, like for example the device specific number, which is the network token. I'll show you what that looks like. I have saved a test card here that supports network tokenization. I'm going to pay with it, and I'm going to show you what is returned in the payload. So hit pay, and the payment is successful. I'm going to copy this and put it somewhere where we can see what's going on. Okay, so this is the payment response payload. Here, if you scroll down, you're gonna see that the payment is successful, it's approved, but also that there are additional details here under source of funds. Here you can see there's a value called device specific number, which is the network token number. So this is what was sent for the payment, not the actual card number. And to explain further on what I mean by the card updates automatically is that the gateway will always pay with the network token, this value over here, the device specific number. And let's say one day the card got replaced because it was stolen or expired. When you pay with the network token, when that happens, the gateway is gonna have a new card number here returned to it by the issuer, because the issuer said thanks for your payment, but here's the new card number that was issued because the first one expired, and it's gonna update it here. So that's it. That's how you enable network tokenization using Mastercard gateway tokens. It's fairly easy. You don't need to update your integration. All you gotta do is just tell your payment service provider to enable it, and there you have it. Okay, so that's it for the tutorial for the gateway tokenization. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. I'm gonna link everything in the description box. And just remember, this is only an integration demo. It's not an official guide. If you need the official guide, check the description box below for the link. And just like every video, I will also post the full source code for this project on my Patreon channel. Subscribe there to support the channel and to get the full source code. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.